All right, let's talk about CSS transitions, those great little tiny animations that you can add to your interfaces that really give it that wow factor. So I have a simple web page here. I've got a header and a main. Inside the main element, I have a div with the class box. There's three different parts inside of that: box title, box content, and box footer. So I've got these three parts. I've got the footer moved up so it's covering the bottom part of the content. The image is rotated slightly. So these are just the default styles. Let's look at a few things that we can do here. If I go up to the heading here, the box title, I've got some styling on the H2 element inside of it, and letter spacing is set to 1px. Now I've created another class here called 9, where I'm changing the letter spacing to 9px. If I come into the H2 and I add the class 9, that's the change that I'm making. So if we remove it, add it, so you can see what the change is. Now, adding another class to an element isn't something you can do from the CSS, but it's something that you could do from JavaScript. If I was to have a script right here, and what I'm doing is I've got an interval that's going to run every 2 seconds, and it's going to add and remove that class. So if you're working with JavaScript as well, you can have animations set up so that when you add or remove a class, it changes the appearance of something on the screen. Now, a transition is how do you get from one state to the other? So how do I add these spaces? Well, anytime you have a property that can have in-between states, so letter spacing in this example, 1px, 9px, the amount of letter spacing could be any value in between there. That is something that you could do a transition with. If it was something like display block, display none, well, there is no in-between state. You can't say that something is sort of display block or sort of display none. It's one or the other. When you've got things that are binary like that, you cannot do a transition. But if there's something where there are in-between values, then we can do a transition. So let's come up here. We know that this script is running once every 2 seconds to go between them. I want to add an animation. I want it to gradually grow, gradually expand. So what we do is we come in here and we say we're going to create a transition. And that is we're going to explain to the browser how we want to get from this first value to this second value. There are 4 properties, and I've added some comments in here. This file is going to be down in the comments section if you want to download it. There's 4 parts to the transition property. I can write the shorthand, which is usually what I do, or you can write out the 4 individual properties all on their own. This is the order that they get written in. The first one is the property itself. You can use the keyword all, or you can name a specific property. So I can say all, meaning anything that can be transitioned, I want it to transition. Or give a specific name for a property, like in our case here, letter spacing. The second property is duration. How long do you want this to take? And the S stands for seconds. So you can be decimal values, it can be integers, any numeric value. The third property is the timing function. So that's how you move from one to the other. Ease, linear, ease in, ease in, out, step start, step end, steps, cubic-bezier. I'm going to show you some stuff for cubic-bezier in a couple minutes. So let's go back up here to our transition, and we're only going to be animating this one property, creating a transition on this. So letter spacing is the thing I want to do a transition on. And I have 2 seconds between one state and the other. Every 2 seconds is when the class gets added. So let's go for, let's say 0.9 seconds is how long we want this transition to take. And there we go. That's all I needed to add was the property and the amount of time. Now, when that class is added and removed through the JavaScript, the transition in the CSS takes over. Now we have this nice little animation that takes place. That's what a transition is. It's going from one state to another. Now, you're not always going to be using JavaScript to add and remove classes. We also have the pseudo-classes. Let's take a look at this image as an example. So we've got images inside the box content. Here's all the properties they've got. And what if box content image hover, or box content hover image? There we are. Now we're saying any image that's inside of an element with the class box content, if box content is being hovered over, this is what it's going to get. And I'm going to use a transform property. Rotate -15 degrees. Okay. So when I move over here, there we go. With the hover property, when I move my mouse over the box content area, it changes this. If I wanted to make that a transition, well, same way as I was doing before, I would say transition. The property I'm changing is transform. Not transform, but transform. And I want it to take, let's say, 0.6 seconds. Whenever you're changing things in the interface, something between 0.2 and 0.6 tends to be a good amount of time. If you want something that's just a quick little enhancement, you know, person mouses over something and you want something to quickly happen, if it takes too long, it can become a little tedious. But 0.6 seconds is probably a really good value to have. All right, refresh this, make sure we get the latest. And there we go. Now when we mouse over, it takes 0.6 seconds to go that 30-degree rotation. Okay, last one. Let's do the one at the bottom here. We're going to take the footer and we're going to move it off of the content. We want to move it down. Now, right now, the box footer, if we look at the CSS for that, it's got padding on the top and bottom of 1 rem. The line height for the two paragraphs inside there is 1 rem. So we've got 1 rem, 2, 3, 4. This is a total of 4 rems. I can add a transform, and I'm going to say I'm going to be doing a translate Y, so in the up-down direction. And I'm going to move it 0 rem. That is my default. So it's not moving at all. However, I'm going to add box footer hover. So when we hover over the box footer, or actually even better than that, let's do box hover dot box footer. So if I put my mouse anywhere over the box element itself, we're going to do something to the box, and we're going to change the transform. Instead of having it as 0, we're going to move it down 4 rem, because we know that was the height. There we go. So it moves 4 rem whenever we hover anywhere over the box. So anywhere inside this box, it's moved down. We want to turn that into an animation. So we add our transition. The transition describes how we move from one state to the other. The property that we're changing is transform. It's not translate Y. Transform is the property that we're changing. And let's make it go quickly, but I want to have a little bit of a delay. So let's say there's going to be a 0.3 second delay. And then inside of here, we can add that easing, the timing function. Ease linear, ease in, ease out. Let's do ease in. All right, move over. There we go. And so there's a little bit of a delay, and then it moves. And that's how the animation works. That final property, that 0.3 seconds, that is the delay. So there's 0.3 seconds that goes by. Then the ease in starts with the 0.4 second transform. The 0.4 seconds is how long it takes to move from one state to the other. Okay, so that's the effects that we need on our animation, on our box, the animated effects. Now let's talk a little bit about the timing functions, and then we'll get into the cubic-bezier. So the difference between all of these different functions that we have here. Ease linear. So linear is the easiest. That means that it's going to take the same amount of time to go from one state to the next. The changes are going to be evenly distributed throughout whatever the time is. If you're going to say it's 1 second to go from 1 pixel to 10 pixels, then it's 0.1 seconds for each of the 0.1 pixels that are the 1 pixel that you're moving. So it's evenly distributed throughout. Ease in means it's starting slowly, it's easing into the animation, and it will gradually speed up. Ease out means it starts faster and then slows down. Ease in out, it's going to be slower at the start and at the end, faster in the middle. Ease is just the reverse of that. It's faster at either end. Or sorry, the ease is easing in, it's speeding up through the entire thing. Step start, step end, steps. Well, I like to use this little illustration here to help explain this one. With steps, what we're saying is this is the number of steps I want the animation to take. So it'll take whatever your starting state is, your ending state is, and it cuts it up into this many steps. So if I said 4 as an example, if it's going to take 4 steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, these are my 4 steps that it's going to show. The second part here, the start or the end, is where do you want that delay? Because I've got all of these. Here's the first, here's the second, here's the third, and here's the fourth state. Do I want to have a delay at the beginning before it shows that first one? Or do I want to change it instantaneously and show the 1, 2, 3, 4 and have the delay at the end? So is there a delay at the beginning or delay at the end? So is this the first change here, or is the final change done here at the end? So we've got these 4 steps, and it's, do you want the start? Do you want the end? That's the difference between. And step start is like saying steps 1 start. Step end is like steps 1 end. Cubic-bezier, that's the last one. And this one really is much easier to show than to do anything else. So let's take a look at this website, cubic-bezier.com. Great website. We have here a bunch of handles that we can drag around to make this look like other transforms. So if I do this, and I move this in here, I'm getting pretty close to the linear. When I drag these guys into the middle here like this, so linear and this, they're going to do the same thing. You can see in the middle I was off just by a little tiny bit. But that's what linear is. Ease, you can see if I take this one handle and move it down like this, and then take the other handle and I move it like that. So I'm looking like this diagram. And, oh, sorry, switch that over. There we go. So I'm pretty close to what it's doing. That's the ease. Ease in. The blue one is the ease in. So you can see it starts slow and it speeds up. Ease out. Starts quick and it slows down. Ease in out. It's slow at the start and slow at the end. Now these are both taking 2.4 seconds. They get to the end at the same time. It's just a question of how you arrange these. So this curve describes how it's going to act. This curve is the speed, whether it's speeding up or slowing down. And these numbers right here represent this curve. That's what these numbers are. They're describing that cubic-bezier curve. So you can play with this. Great website. So linear goes the same speed all the way through. And you can see how my cubic-bezier, if I move this around, how that's changing this. So you can play with it and decide if you're really, really happy with this and how it changes, then you can just save, copy those numbers. Okay, great. I've got those numbers, and I can come back in here, and in my transition, instead of ease in, we can say, I want to use cubic-bezier, and there's my numbers. So save that, come back to my web page, refresh. Now let's slow this down a little bit so we can see it a bit better. So we'll say 1 second with no delay. So you can see there's a little bit of a stutter step that it does inside there with those numbers. So you can manually play with the numbers or use a tool like this and get it done much faster and much more accurately than just trying to figure out the math to do those. The last thing that I wanted to point out was this little bit of syntax right here, and that is if you want multiple transitions. Now, I said before you could use the property all. That way, if there are multiple things that you're changing, let's do the box footer as an example. Right now I'm saying transform is the property. If I said all, okay, that's not going to make any difference to what's going on here. It's still going to do the transform property that's changing. But what if I added another property inside here? Let's say color, red. So now my font color is changing to red, and you can see how it goes through that transition. But it does the exact same time, the 1 second delay, and it uses the cubic-bezier. So it's the exact same for both of these properties that are changing. If I was to change the padding as well to rem, so now I've got 3 properties that are changing because I said all. But what if I wanted those things to happen with different easing, with different times? In that case, what I would do is I say transform takes 1 second, cubic-bezier. Then I'm going to change the color, but it's going to take 3 seconds, and it's going to be a linear change. And I also want to change the padding, but I want it to take 2 seconds, and it's going to be an ease in. Not an east in, but an ease in. All right. There, so you can see that the 3 different animations are taking place at different times with different types of easing, different timing functions. So just comma-separated lists allows you to target things and apply different properties. If all 3 of them, or 4 or 5 or 12 things are happening at the same time, and you want them to take place with the same duration, the same delay, the same timing function, then you can just say all, transition all, and then you put the properties out. You don't have to list them. This is for times when you want to have slightly different animations, or you want to stagger things. Let's say I want to take the first one, transform 1 second with a 0 second delay, and then color is also going to take 1 second, but it doesn't start until 1 second later. And then padding is going to take 1 second, but it's got a 2 second delay. So the first one's got 0, and then 1, and then 2. So this one's going to take place, then the color, then the padding. So the move, then the color, then the padding. So you can create these sequences of animations that are going to take place. All right, so I hope you find that useful. Any questions, please leave them in the comments. And as always, thanks for watching.